Hello, it is the 6th of July. I'm Shane Greenup, my daily vlog, and quite a lot I actually want to sort of cover today, touch on and talk about, because yesterday I was feeling really very good, very productively minded anyway, had a lot going on. I guess I'm excited again, probably in large part because I've decided to do this podcast, and my curse is I love new projects, I love new things, I like creating, and I don't think it's uncommon that I don't enjoy the tedium of doing the work and getting stuck in the thing, but that's what inevitably happens when you stumble across a good project and have to make it work. So of course you spend the majority of your time in the nitty-gritty doing the boring stuff, but new projects are exciting and creative and imagination flowing and organizing and planning, and the potential of what could be so much more interesting and exciting than the reality of doing any of it. So I'm excited at the moment because new project. But that's good. That's energizing me and keeping me moving forwards in the things that I'm working on. And it's great that the new project is perfectly aligned with what I'm working on. So the new project being a podcast idea of simply having 30-minute to 1 hour long conversations with people that are working in the misinformation space, entrepreneurs that are developing apps, academics that are doing research, people, representatives of Facebook and Google, talking to them about what they're doing to fight fake news and misinformation. Government representatives is another category I've come up with. I've come up with a list of potential guests: journalists, community organizers. So the first person I actually wanted to have on it was Dwight Nell, the organizer of MisinfoCon, or one of, I think he's the there's quite a few people involved in it, and I wanted to have him because it seemed like a great guest for the first episode, was someone who is core to the community and has the finger and pulse of what's happening in a lot of different places, because the objective of the podcast is to be sort of a center of the community, to help anyone who's interested in the subject matter to stay up to date with what's being done, who's working on what, and what's happening. So as well as the interviews I was going to have, I think this is kind of obvious, have a news segment at the beginning of announcements, things that are happening, events that are coming up, and other things like grants, calls for papers. These are sorts of things that people that are working in the space, academics, whatever, will be interested to find out about. This is the stuff that I'm always looking for myself. So, yeah, the idea for the podcast is pretty clear in my head. I know what I want to do. Just got to execute it now. And that feels reasonably straightforward because I'm keeping it straightforward. I don't want to make this hard. I don't want to make it a big deal. I don't want to make another Socratic Web, which is going to be a massive thing that's all time consuming. This should just be, I'm going to make a YouTube channel and, find out where I upload the audio podcast content for iTunes and for the various podcast network players and things like that. And just record it as a video call, and then extract the audio from it and just upload them, and give it a name, and I want to do summary notes as well, so I may have to make a simple website, but I mean I'd literally make a free website or just host it in my Medium blog or a Steam It blog or something like that. So keeping it as simple as possible. The only thing holding me back now is I wanted to have Dwight, but Dwight's unavailable until like a week and a half away, and I really want to get it started. I want to have my first episode out so I can get the ball rolling and improving, partly just because I'm excited about it and eager to get started, and partly because I've got to get my crowdfunding done, and I see the value in launching this and getting these episodes happening before the crowdfunding begins, so that if there's any success of this, if there's any traction, then this just becomes yet another avenue I have for promoting the crowdfunding. I can mention it in each of the episodes while the crowdfunding's happening, which will hopefully help reach our funding goals. So, synergy. This looks like gangster stuff. Synergy. No, it's just not that cool. So you say, yeah, I wanted Dwight, but he's not available for a week and a half. And I've reached out to Mike Hind because he runs the Disinformation Age podcast. He's only done 7 episodes so far, and the last one was in April. So I think he's still doing it. He may have stopped, but I think he hasn't done any for a while because he's been moving country and just, life happens sometimes and the episodes have stopped. So he came to mind as a second option because he runs another podcast in the space, though I think it's quite distinctly different to what I'm going to be doing because he's been focusing on Twitter bots. It's sort of like his starting storyline that he was exploring and is following that story and that concept through to its end. And so it's almost like he comes from a journalism background, so it's like he's telling more of a narrative and exploring and doing journalism on this concept, whereas I'm more interested in just sort of community bonding. So I feel like he's another good option for someone who is sort of in the center of this ecosystem and looking out broadly. I don't know him from any other context though. Like I don't see him in any of the active mailing lists or Slack channels or anything. So it's not that I think of him as well connected to the community so much as just I'm looking for someone who is in the center of this concept and looking at it for the first episode, as opposed to I met Dhruv Gulati the other night at the sneak peek to briefer Fact Martyrs thing, and he said he's interested in doing a call for the podcast, and I'm keen to do that, but I don't. What I'm saying, for the first episode, I want someone broad, whereas Dhruv is like, he's Fact Martyr, he's working on a thing, and I definitely want that in the podcast. But for the first episode, I was just hoping to get someone else where it's like, okay, then let's look at the lay of the landscape and everything that's happening. What do you know? What do you think? And so forth. And then after that, then we can start getting into this person's working on this, and he's an academic that's researching this specific thing. And I'll still ask them broad questions, but it was just an idea I had. What's difficult though is Mike said he's busy until Sunday at least, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to get a call with him on Monday. So I may have to just sort of ditch my hopes of having the perfect person for the first episode and just start emailing people and going, when are you free? Let's do a call and do this podcast thing, and whoever bites first gets first. So doing that now. Let me share my. Yeah, that's happening. So I've got a list of people that I'm going to reach out to and potential guests. I said the other day, probably yesterday, that I registered for the Start Some Good. It's back. It's a crowdfunding course to help you launch your crowdfunding thing. This is a Udemy course, so I'm working through that. Honestly, so far I haven't gained anything particularly from the course. It's all basic stuff. It's very clearly for people that haven't done crowdfunding before and don't know what they're doing. I haven't done crowdfunding yet, but I've been, as is generally like my curse in life, is that I know enough to be dangerous about just about everything, and I've read a lot about crowdfunding. I've followed it since it was created conceptually and reading articles and just following Kickstarter and stuff because I'm just a net nerd who reads shit and pays attention. And a year ago I started going, okay, then I think I'll Start Some Good and do some crowdfunding for Rebutter at the time, which has since become the Socratic Web. And back when I decided that, I went and did what I know you do whenever you're doing something that you don't know much about. It's like Googled how to do a good crowdfunding, how to do this, and put together documents and took notes of all the things I needed to do. So I have a pretty good handle on what to do already. The only reason I paid for the course really was to give myself some structure and a timeline of making sure I'm making the progress that I need to be making, and having someone else sort of looking over my shoulder going, but did you do this? Or maybe you've forgotten this. So hopefully I still get some value from that. But so far it's just been, do you know what you're raising money for? Are you sure you can raise that much money? Who is your community? And one of the work sheet that they gave was like figuring out your reach, like how many people you have contact with, their propensity to donate or participate in the crowdfunding, you know, how likely are they to actually give money, and then their capacity, how much money can they give, and so you get those numbers and you can figure out as an estimate of how much money you expect to be able to raise. Now, I sort of put together a sheet of like my various reaches is pretty phenomenal now because I've been working on this for so long, and probably shouldn't show that necessarily. I don't know. I have got so many communities that I'm part of, from the skeptic community to journalism contacts to entrepreneurial networks. There's so many people that are interested in the work that I'm doing. I'm connected to so many academics that my reach is pretty substantial, and that's been very intentional because like obviously to grow a startup or to grow a project, you need to have a significant enough network of interested people, otherwise no one's interested, no one cares, and it's a waste of your time. But I mean, for crowdfunding purposes, I have avoided crowdfunding this whole time because I know the other half of the equation is missing in this, which is that I don't have any rewards. I don't have a product that anyone wants to pay for here. I have an outcome that everyone wants, but no one wants to do. And that's always been the problem with Rebutta, and is it an ongoing problem with the Socratic Web, is it's always a problem for someone else to fix. So I've avoided crowdfunding because I never understood why anyone would give money other than as a donation. And that's ultimately what I'm looking for here, is I'm going to be running the crowdfunding. I'll have rewards, but the rewards are just token gestures, like names on websites. And I don't know, I'll try and come up with things, and maybe I'll have like stickers and magnets with the branding on it or whatever, which again, it's like no one really cares. And for like really high level donors, maybe I can offer, hey, let's meet up for lunch and ask me anything you want. Like, again, implying someone wants to meet with me and I'm exciting. I'm the exciting reward, which, maybe some people, it's something, but I don't think that's going to motivate anyone. The only thing that's going to motivate people is the desire to see this project successful. And so the only way that will work as crowdfunding is if I have a reach substantial enough that enough people will see it, that if 1% of them act, then I might get some money. So yeah, I've got a huge reach of interested parties. So the propensity is, well, this is it. It's like their interest in the subject matter is high. Doesn't mean they're interested in parting with their money for it. So the propensity is sort of like a balance between those two things. It's like they want to see success in this space. Doesn't mean they think that this is going to do it or that giving me money is going to help. But yeah, so I've tried to overcompensate with as many people as possible. And I sent out a tweet that basically summarized. This is another article I think I need to write because this came up when I was at the Facmata event for Briefer, which is funny because what's his name? Martin Robbins is their product manager, who apparently he's reasonably well known, very well known skeptic in the UK. So they are connected to the skeptic community through him. But it was kind of funny because I was talking to Drew at the time, and I'm like, have you tried connecting with the skeptic community? He's like, no. I'm like, they are the community that they were on this subject before fake news became a thing. They've been fighting misinformation for decades, and so this is hence I've said this quite a few times at different conferences with different people I've spoken to, that this is where Rebutta had its successes with the skeptics, and so I was very heavily involved in the skeptic community for a few years, and so it's kind of shocking to me now that it's like it's gone mainstream, this misinformation problem, and now we've got academics and journalists all looking at it, and they're acting. First of all, the problem is the skeptics haven't solved the problem, so to some extent they're right. It's like they're looking at this like it's a new problem and they're trying to figure it out. And in a way, they're right because they have to figure it out still. But they're acting like they're working from a blank slate almost. It's like, and in the responses of some of the people who are at this event, when I mentioned skeptics, they're like, "There's a skeptic community. Like, what is this? Like, who organizes it? Where does it happen?" They just People literally don't know that the skeptic community exists, and of course, like any such community, there is no the community. It's just sort of an amorphous body of people that are ideologically aligned, self-organizing in small local areas or online groups. But as soon as you know the concept of the skeptics, and you go to the subreddit skeptics, and go to skeptic.com, and your local skeptic chapter or whatever, they exist. Go and learn from them and the lessons that they've learned, because they haven't solved the problem, sure, but they've learned a lot about what doesn't work. And this is what I have felt frustrated with in this space more than anything, is watching all these people come into it thinking it's a blank slate and going, why don't we just do this? And then they throw the money and the time at it, and I'm sitting there going, because it doesn't work. It's been tried. We've done it. Not here, not as journalists and not as academics, but the skeptic community have they know this doesn't work. They've done it. Yeah, not on the news topic, and this is the key difference is that now that it's fake news, it's the turnover time is so short. News articles come and go, and so I feel like a lot of people are looking at that makes it different. It's got to be fast. It's got to be reactive. We need automation to identify things quickly. And yeah, it's a little bit different, but it's really not that different. The skeptics are typically fighting things that are permanent fixtures that are problematic. The cliches, ghosts and the paranormal and psychic abilities and things like that. But more often these days, it's anti-science stuff. So it's anti-evolution, anti-climate change, anti-vaccination, medical fraudsters, so cancer treatments and homeopathy and things like that. Now these are permanent fixtures where you can just write criticisms of homeopathy. But being involved in that space, you're not just writing the article against homeopathy and the article against anti-vaccination. There is a constant feed of articles coming out in those spaces, because we live on the internet now, and there's blogs everywhere, and very popular blogs. So it's not Fox News publishing articles about how vaccination will turn you gay and cause autism, of course, but it doesn't matter that Fox News isn't doing it. What matters is that someone's doing it, and then it gets shared on social media. So I guess that's part of it. Is because the fake news thing took off, there's all these journalists coming out going, oh no, how do we deal with this? Because shit, we're not responsible for the news anymore, because anyone can write it, anyone can have blogs, and this is the real problem, and how do we fix the media so that people trust in the media again, so they know the difference between unreliable blogs and real journalism and stuff. Whereas from the skeptic side of things, it's the skeptics have been involved in fighting these concepts for so long, and then the internet comes up, and they've just watched it move from vague concepts that are static to, well, now anyone can write anything, and so there's constantly articles coming out of these things, and we've got to constantly fight each of these articles. And so the fact that now it's affecting news rather than just affecting the science, the science of climate change, the science of evolution, and so forth, the academic and journalist community suddenly feels it threatening to their world and their ecosystem, and are treating it like it's their thing. But it's exactly the same fight as it's always been. It's false beliefs creating misinformation and spreading it. It's just that the internet's allowed anyone to create it in this constantly evolving, ongoing publishing, blog posting, article posting, media posting way, so that the line between writing articles and writing news, it's not clear. It's not obvious what the difference there is. So I think the distinction is minuscule, if there at all. So the point is the skeptics have been doing it. Learn from their mistakes. Learn from their lessons. Yes. Probably shouldn't have done that while I'm recording. Blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, that's right. And there's one other thing that happened, and this has already gone quite a long time. I had a lot to say today, I guess. Let's tweet about that. I waded into a topic that I don't know enough about on Twitter, and made an argument, and then got like a little bit more, not very much, but like people like making assumptions about my positions and stuff, and it was a bit frustrating. I ended up just deleting the tweet because I don't care enough about the subject matter. Like, I mean, I care enough about it's immigration based. I care enough about the subject matter in a wider sense, but I don't know enough about the politics of each of the individual presidents and the administrations and the politics around it and so forth. To argue with people that are clearly very passionate about it and probably know a lot more about it than I do. I wasn't trying to argue so much with them, but the point that I was making was that like people what I read from their comments was like, well, this is a problem that's been in since the Obama administration, and you know, Trump's just more transparent with it. It's more visible, and the media is misrepresenting it like it's Trump doing everything, but Obama and his predecessors set this up. It's a systemic hostility towards immigrants, which I don't disagree with. It's definitely a systemic hostility. The point that I was trying to make is that, but the Trump administration definitely is hostile, and I think there's a difference between the systemic fundamental of having like an ideological belief that you want to have secure borders, which seems to be integrated into the current US political environment and has been for decades, which I disagree with generally, but that's what they want. So there's a systemic enforcement of that. And that in itself is hostile, but there's a big difference between administrations and politicians who recognize that political desire / maybe even agree with it, but are trying to do it in a way which is as compassionate and as practical as possible within the constraints of the complexity of politics, which is you can't just do what you want generally. Trump's challenging that by just doing whatever the fuck he wants and disregarding consequences. Let's put this back on. That's still to make that up. But yeah, watching Obama be the president and watching, I think the Republicans had the majority of Congress the majority of the time he was in, if not all of it. So watching nearly everything he tried to do being shut down, struck down, ignored, filibustered, and so forth. I have one rule with politics is that politics is hard. And so everyone that goes, why don't they just? It's like, because you don't understand the complexity of the situation and the problem and the game that need to be played to get things done. And so then I'm perfectly happy to accept there may be a lot of naivety in me on this subject, and maybe I'm giving Obama too much of benefit of the doubt. And I say that as someone who doesn't, who has plenty of criticism for Obama for his policies, his whistleblowing, his attitude towards whistleblowers was horrific. Of course, the drones and his ongoing warfare is horrific, and all that sort of stuff. It's easy to criticize Obama, and I do. I'm not a fan of the Democrats or the Republicans, the Liberals or Labor. All the mainstream parties are fucking rubbish. But I also recognize the value of a stable political ecosystem and the complexity in changing it. You can't just go, why don't you just, and then just do it, and then expect everything to just flow smoothly, because massive changes create massive disturbances and instability, and that affects people's lives, and it could ruin livelihoods and can kill people. It can have all sorts of consequences that are unexpected. That's wider context to this. So the point that I was trying to make is that, Obama wasn't great for immigration, for immigrants and so forth, and children were separated from parents while he was in power, and people were detained, and that's horrific, and I'm not for it. But I think there's a clear difference between presidents and administrations who are trying to figure out how to work within the political ideology of the time of having strong borders and be compassionate and empathic to the people that are trying to come there and find a way to make this work for them and for the nation while being re-elected by the population, who are being fed a constant stream of misinformation and disinformation about the immigrants and about the threat to the American way of life and so forth. And they've got to balance all of those considerations up. Versus Trump, who's like, oh, they're all rapists and murderers and stuff. And his attitude's clear as day. Jeff Sessions' attitude is clear as day. And they introduce intentionally penalizing. There's a word there that I'm dropping. Whatever. Rules that are intentionally designed to punish people and to make them fearful of coming. And they don't even pretend otherwise. So, yes, Trump made it worse, but Obama made it, or Bush made it for him, and Clinton made it. It's just been stepping up since then. And I don't disagree with that. But I also think that I don't think it's fair to say that someone who's trying to do their best with a shit situation and failing to improve things is the same as someone who comes in and goes, you know what, fuck it, we're just going to make it worse. Like, the intentions really matter. And this is where I may be naive, and maybe Obama was an arsehole. Maybe, the Democrats had more power to do more, and they genuinely didn't want to help the situation, not for fear of being voted out, which is what I'm arguing is the case, and not because of constraints of political meeting in the middle and costs and benefits of deals, but because they really don't care and like, fuck it, this doesn't matter to us. We'll just do whatever we want. Maybe I'm naive and maybe that's true. I don't believe it to be the case. I think the Democrats do actually care to some extent, and I think Republicans genuinely think that immigrants are a threat to their way of life and aren't white enough. I'm probably revealing some bias there. As with all biases, I have that bias, I have that belief because I can list a long fucking string of examples that justifies the bias. The clear racism that's come out of the current Republican Party, and the fact that most minorities do support the Democrat Party, and the Democratic Party is much more inclusive with minorities. And the Democratic Party, like, knowing that most, Central American, South American, and Mexican immigrants will end up voting for the Democratic Party, why wouldn't the Democratic Party actually want more immigrants coming into the country to reinforce their power? So the whole notion that they're like just as bad or part of the problem, and I do agree with that. I'd have no sympathy for the Democratic Party. I think they are the institutional, capitalistic, self-enforcing piece of crap. But recognize the complexity of the system. You don't just fix things. It's more complex than that. Anyway, that was a small rant that I couldn't get into on Twitter, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to have a fight in this stupid, shitty space where my forced, constrained text space would force me to say things that don't reveal the complexity of what I think about it, and then I'd get responded to on the superficiality of what people read into what I said, and then I have to defend a position that I don't hold because I feel goaded into it and I hate it, and Twitter sucks for having conversations. Okay, now to get back on to work. So what I'm doing now, I'm going to watch some of this Start Some Good thing and see if there's anything in for me, and start working on my campaign pitch. Get it done. See you tomorrow.